Welcome back to another Christmas episode. We're going to be doing another study on Christmas or things that are related to Christmas, and I'm going to jump right into it tonight or today, wherever you may be. It may be a different time, but I think it's important that we go through these things. There are a lot of people talking about these days, and they're kind of talking about from the same point of view as always, but we are going to take eventually through a few of these a much different look than I think I've ever heard before. No one's mentioning because why? Many people are afraid to take a stand. They want to go with what everybody's going with, and well, the Bible teaches us not to do that. All right, we're going to start with the Paradise Tree. I think I mentioned the Paradise Tree before, but I'm going to go through it again real quick. The Paradise Tree, which originated as part of the medieval mystery plays, which were religious dramas that were performed in Europe, particularly in Germany and France during the Middle Ages. These plays depicted stories from the Bible, including the creation and fall of man. The Paradise Tree represented the tree of knowledge from the Garden of Eden, which played a central role in the story of Adam and Eve's temptation. Now, when we look at the tradition, we see the medieval mystery plays, because during Christmas Eve, mystery plays were staged in towns and villages across the area. One of the most important parts of these plays was the Adam and Eve scene, in which the actors playing Adam and Eve would stand by the paradise tree, often decorating it with apples, which, as we know, the Bible does not mention apples, and people will say, well, does it make a difference? It does, because if it's not in the Bible, why are we doing apple? Why not just a fruit? And why not look at a fruit that might have been used during that time frame, like pomegranates? But, what are you going to do? Symbolizing, of course, the forbidden fruit. Then the paradise trees happen to get in the homes. Over time, the tradition of the paradise tree, which obviously grew itself and evolved itself into a Christmas tree. It moved from just the stage to private homes. People began to set up decorated trees in their homes, especially during the Advent season. The tree was often adorned with apples, which again, not the actual fruit, wafers, symbolizing the Eucharist, and other fruits. These decorations symbolize the tree of knowledge and the fall of Adam and Eve, marking a symbolic reminder of the beginning of humanity's salvation story. And again, we have the evolution of the Christmas tree from the Paradise Tree. The Paradise Tree tradition, which became intertwined with Christmas customs over time. By the 16th century, people began to replace the apples and other fruit with candles. By the way, when I say 16th century, that is not here in the United States of America, or America, however you want to call it. Some people say the USA, some just call it America. These early Christmas trees were part of the celebration of Christmas Eve, with the tree symbolizing the promise of salvation through the birth of Christ. Martin Luther and the Christmas tree is a famous story, I guess. False, but famous. It's commonly believed that Martin Luther, the German Protestant reformer, was instrumental in popularizing the custom of decorating a tree with candles in the early 16th century, but he did not invent the Christmas tree or the decorating. It's always been there. The story goes supposedly that when he was walking one evening, he was inspired by seeing stars twinkling through the trees on a winter evening and wanted to recreate this, what he called a heavenly sight, by adding candles to the branches of a tree. Stephen, what's wrong with that? Well, it's a beautiful thing. It's beautiful to think of the Lord and what he's made in creation. Absolutely, but understand where the origins of what we're talking about. By the 18th and 19th centuries, the tradition of the Christmas tree had spread from Germany to other parts of Europe, and eventually to the United States, evolving into the modern Christmas tree that we know today, even made out of metal and plastic and all types of stuff. Some people even have carved wooden trees. Wait, carved wooden trees? Uh-oh. But anyways, carved wooden trees in their homes. So we look at the symbolism. See, I'm reading my own writing, and I can't read, and I'm a little cold this evening. My heater shut off tonight in my podcast area. Don't know why I ran out of heat. Tree of knowledge. The paradise tree symbolized the tree in the Garden of Eden, which bore the fruit of temptation that Adam and Eve ate, leading to their expulsion from paradise. It was a reminder of the fall of man. Over time, the paradise tree began to symbolize not only the fall, see, they just keep adding things and change it all around, but also the hope of redemption. Yeah, let's throw that in as well. See, they can never get their mind straight. That is the Catholic Church. They just keep changing things, just keep changing things. When we look at the modern Christmas tree and the paradise tree, and then we know that's connected to the tree of knowledge, we keep doing these things. And over the centuries, it just is where we are now. They've taken all those things and combined them into one. Let's talk about Constantine for a moment. What was his role? What was his influence on Christianity? Now, if you don't know, Constantine was the first Roman emperor to supposedly convert to Christianity, and he played a major role in the promotion of Christianity within the Roman Empire. I think in 313 AD, he issued the, what does it say on my paper? Edict of Milan, which legalized Christianity, ending centuries of persecution against Christians, which is false because it was just certain Christians. The Christians who defied the empire were still persecuted and killed. Got to fall in line with what the Vatican tells you to do. I'm sorry, the Roman Empire, which now was the Vatican. Constantine's support of Christianity helped to shape the development of Christmas and Christian practices and festivals within the Roman Empire. Now, as many people know today, December 25th, or the first recording celebration of Christmas, was on December 25th. That took place in 336 during Constantine's reign with Bishop Mark, who brought it to his attention. They got together and decided that might be a good idea. Bishop Mark and Constantine decided, hey, listen, we got to blend these together. We got to get everybody under the same umbrella, so to speak. I'm sure they didn't use the word umbrella. I'm just summing it up for you. There's other writings about this that are more detailed. Some of it I can't even read. They just want to get everything under the same thing. They chose the date because it coincided with the pagan festivals that celebrate the winter solstice. So they want to get that Roman festival of Sol Invictus and stuff under the same, situation, which was, by the way, if you didn't know, the festival that honored the sun god, which is funny because the date symbolized the rebirth of the sun. Not the birth of the sun. Just saying. The Council of Nicaea took a stab at it in 325 AD when Constantine convened the First Council of Nicaea. It was brought up briefly there, and they were trying to establish one at the time, but they couldn't quite get together fully on it. While there were earlier mentions of the celebration of Christ's birth in various regions within the Roman Empire at that time, there was no established date until the established date we know now, December 25th. It was in different time frames. It was December 8th. I think they had one in March, January, even had one in February. They couldn't get on the same page until they decided, hey, you know what? Why don't we just combine it with the winter solstice? Put it all in one umbrella. So says Constantine, the Roman Empire. Sure, Bishop Mark said it was handpicked by the Roman Empire behind the scenes. So, there you go. As I said, Constantine did not invent Christmas, but he did help solidify the observance of Christmas on December 25th. And as we know, that was the Christianizing of pagan festivals, and I would say those aren't the real Christians anyways. So, while Constantine did not invent Christmas, he did play a significant role in shaping its early observances with Bishop Mark by supporting Christianity, promoting its practices, and helping to establish December 25th as the official date. But as I said before, there were different dates: March 25th, January 6th, December 25th, I already said that, February 9th, I think, December 11th, I think, which was weird because that's my birthday. That was another one picked, and someone wanted to do it in November. I did not write it down, but I remember reading that at one point in time. So, you have all these different dates that are put into place. I don't understand how you can't realize the situation at hand. Now let's talk about a little bit about the medieval mystery plays. I talked briefly about that earlier. The medieval mystery plays were just theatrical performances that, at the time, flourished in Europe, particularly during the Middle Ages, from the 10th to the 16th century. The plays were often part of religious festivals and were created to teach supposed biblical stories to a large illiterate population. You ever notice how the elite go after the people who can't read their stuff so they won't know the truth? That's William Tyndale. That's Wycliffe. They were an important form of entertainment and religious devotion. I don't know if those two always go together, but we'll say go ahead. The word mystery itself actually comes from the Latin mysterium, meaning a religious or sacred play in medieval times. It refers not to a puzzle or a crime story today. Oh, it's a mystery. No, it was to represent the sacred mystery. Roman Catholic Church love their sacred mysteries, don't they? Because they don't want you to know. That way you won't be wiser. But the mystery plays were often performed in the vernacular language at that point in time, which was Middle English, Old French, or German, making them accessible to the common people. Ain't that something? Well, after Wycliffe, huh? Ain't that something? This was in contrast to religious services, which were often conducted in Latin, which many in the audience could not understand. What a surprise. But the popularity of mystery plays began to wane at one point in the late Middle Ages and the early Renaissance period. We have then, at that point, the rise of humanism and the Reformation, along with the shift toward different forms of theater that led to the decline of these religious plays. The Protestant Reformation, in particular, led to a rejection of such overtly religious forms of false entertainment, especially in places where Protestantism became finally free and accepted from and escaped from persecution in some areas. Wouldn't always last long, but there you go. Now we have to understand these medieval plays and the origins, which were in the Catholic Church between the 10th and 12th century, where they had the tropes and liturgical dialogues, things of that nature. The monks and clergy were primarily the ones involved. The early, anyways, liturgical dramas were written and performed by the clergy, primarily monks in the monastic communities. They would often perform the scenes within the church during religious services. When we look at the 12th and 14th centuries, we now see the expansion outside the church. As these liturgical dramas grew in popularity, they began to move outside the confines of the Catholic Church into public spaces, and the church itself allowed for more public performances. The expansion coincided with increasing use of vernacular language, again, being language spoken by ordinary people, instead of Latin, making the plays more accessible to a wider audience. By the 13th and 14th centuries, the lay people, particularly the guilds, which we would call nowadays the trade organizations, began to take part in the production of these plays. How about that? Secular world, religious world, we're just going to work together, coexist until we don't exist. The guilds would sponsor, stage, and act in many of these plays, which were often performed in public spaces like the town squares. When we look at these early contributors or contributions, the church, being the Catholic Church, they were the first mystery plays out there, primarily, like I said before, in the form of the liturgical sense, and were used to convey the stories they wanted to. The earliest mystery plays that were written by anonymous clergy members or monks. For example, and I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong because, well, I don't need to speak Latin to be saved. The Quem Coretes, the trope, was likely written by a monk or cleric as part of the Easter liturgy at that time. By the 14th century, the mystery plays began to take on more elaborate forms like the cycle plays, which would often involve a full set of stories, so you're cycling through all the way to the end. These were typically anonymous as well, with no single author credited, as they were collaborated efforts. They collaborated. They coexisted. Great word to have. So there you have it with that part of what I wanted to talk about. And you got to remember these plays that were created by the Catholic Church or the clergy, particularly monks, was part of the church's liturgical services in the Catholic Church, with the early example being the Quam Quaeretis in the 10th century. But over time, these religious plays grew in complexity and moved outside the church, with local guilds and communities taking over their production and performance. The plays became more public and accessible, and the early playwrights were largely anonymous members of that clergy and the monks in cathedrals, as I mentioned before, with no single figure credited, but the Roman Catholic Church as the creator of the mystery play genre. And we know it was specifically in the monastic communities and cathedrals. They were the originators of the medieval mystery plays. Now, if we want to talk briefly, I wasn't going to, but we're going to talk just real quickly about the mystery plays. The Christmas tree, rather, in Pennsylvania. What? Yeah, the first Christmas tree. Now, I talked briefly about this before, but the first Christmas tree in America is commonly attributed to the German immigrants in the mid-19th century, with the tradition of decorating the Christmas tree and which had been celebrated for a long time over there in Germany and Europe. Germany, I tell you, a lot of stuff comes from Germany. You'd be surprised how much bad stuff, and I'm not even going to talk about the Nazis or anything like that. Yes, they were absolutely bad, but there's so much to talk about when it comes to the history of Germany, Stuttgart, and a lot of places like that. The practice of, like I said, putting up Christmas trees is thought to have been brought to America by certain German immigrants, but then over time, with enough information and enough history, they came to realize that it was brought to America by German immigrants in the 18th century. Late 18th century, because no one really thought about it until the 19th century, early 19th century, because the first recorded public display of a Christmas tree in America was in Pennsylvania in the early 1800s, really the 1830s. One of the earliest documented instances of the Christmas tree came from the Pennsylvania German community, which they decorated the evergreens with candles, ornaments, and other decorations, following the customs of their homeland. While Christmas trees were brought to America by German immigrants, the first recorded public Christmas tree that was in the Pennsylvania German community in the early 1800s was specifically there. However, the widespread popularity of Christmas trees in America was then solidified in the mid-19th century, especially after the image of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert with their tree was published in 1848. That somehow was a royal endorsement for here in America. Look at that. We just keep on doing what other people do. How quickly we just become like the world. When we talk about the Pennsylvania German community in the 1830s, they were a group of German-speaking immigrants, clearly just by the name itself, German, who had settled in Pennsylvania, particularly in the southeastern and central parts of the state. These immigrants were primarily from the German states at that time, which now in whole is Germany, and a little bit from Switzerland. They brought with them all of these customs and religious practices. The Pennsylvania Germans, also known as the Pennsylvania Dutch, which is a kind of a corruption of the word Dutch, meaning German, or Deutsch, were probably descendants of immigrants who arrived at that time. Now, the religious groups, many of them anyways, were Mennonites, Amish, and Lutheran. That was the main ones. There was a sprinkle of others, but that was the majority of them. But look at that, Lutherans and Mennonites and Amish. Which is funny because I know some Amish now that don't celebrate it, and I know some Mennonites for some reason don't do it either. But those are like really out there ones that even the Mennonites don't want, which is funny. The Pennsylvania Germans actually maintained their distinctive language during that time frame, and they called it Pennsylvania German or Pennsylvania Dutch, which was just a dialect of German that combined elements of dialect. But I'm going off the rails here. But the religious life was central to their communities, and that's why with the Amish and the Mennonites and the Lutherans in particular, maintained their own schools, churches, and social structures and religious festivals and so forth. and the way they dressed and all that. But most people, if you look it up, you know how they dress. So I don't have to go into all that. But their influence on American Christmas tradition is something to be noted, and that's what we're kind of talking about. As again, I went into other things. But the Pennsylvania Germans were instrumental in shaping many of the early Christmas traditions that became popular in America, especially the Christmas tree tradition. That's what they brought with them, their customs of decorating evergreen trees with candles and ornaments and so forth and so on. The Pennsylvania Germans were also responsible for actually introducing certain Christmas foods and customs to American culture, such as the cookie cutter, which they used to make traditional cookies, but gingerbread and sauerkraut. Man, we let them bring the Christmas tree here. We let them bring the NIV here. Wait, NIV? Yeah, that's right. That's where you get your NIV from as well. But the Christmas tree tradition, which is often associated with the Pennsylvania Germans, was obviously one of the examples how they influenced here. Boy, Germany's always been involved with America. Isn't that funny? I don't know if it's funny. I want to go briefly over the, you know what, I wasn't going to, but you know, we're going to go for it. The first recorded Winter Solstice Festival and all those type of things. So I'm going to look at first ancient Rome because of the Saturnalia. Everybody loves that one. Everybody talks about that one the most. And that was around the time period for that was the 5th century. But they had other forms of it even further back than that. Saturnalia is one of the most famous winter solstices that we know of in history, even though it's around the world, but it's one of the most famous ones that people go to, especially any church building. They'll talk about, oh, I know what you're going to say, Saturnalia. You know, this was a festival in honor of Saturn, the Roman god of agriculture, and celebrated at the end of the growing season and the rebirth of the sun. Mind you, not the birth of the only begotten Son, but the rebirth of the Sun, S-U-N. The festival was marked by feasting, merrymaking, gift-giving. Huh, interesting. Sound familiar? And a temporary reversal of social roles. You know, slaves would often be served by their masters at that time frame. Wacky. That festival took place from December 17th to December 23rd around the winter solstice, and was in time of it was a time at that for them to relax and just celebrate, you know, things. Now you get the ancient Germanic and Norse traditions with Yule. That was, some would say, pre-Christian era. How about that? At least around the 2nd and 4th century. Because everybody keeps on talking about Saturnalia, and we don't talk about the other ones to try to get out of the fact that Christmas is not meant to be celebrated by born-again Christians, born-again Bible-believing Christians. The pre-Christian era, at least around the 2nd and 4th century. Yule is one of the oldest winter solstice festivals celebrated in that ancient period of time with the Germanic and Norse people. It was a festival of a rebirth and light. Here we go, the rebirth. Centered around the idea of the sun's return. There you go, rebirth of the sun instead of the birth of the only begotten Son. The Yule log was a central part of the celebration, and there were feasts and rituals to honor the gods, especially Sol. Who's that? Yeah, exactly. The sun goddess. Many Yule traditions, such as the Yule log and gift giving, were later incorporated into the Christmas celebration. Wait, Christmas was before all those. Wrong. Unless you're listening to a New Age or a New Age Christian or a Catholic, then yeah, wrong. And even those are deceived. People go, oh, you just sound like you hate. No, it's just unfortunately people don't know. And then those who do know don't want to know, to be honest with you. Now you have the Dongzai Festival in China. That's over 2,000 years old. That's been celebrated since the Han Dynasty. The Dongzai Festival is a major traditional celebration in China and other East Asian countries, marking the winter solstice. It is a time to celebrate the return of longer days and the balance of yin and yang, symbolizing the coming of the brighter, warmer days ahead. People celebrate with their family gatherings and the eating of specific foods like tangyuan, which symbolize family unity and warmth. Now, I've probably gone over this before, but I'm clearly going over it again. You have all of these things, which I do not understand why we don't Pay attention. Then you got the Inca civilization. You got the Yule traditions with the Yule log. That was just a symbol of the festivals and representing the sun's return. And the evergreens, the holly, the ivy, the mistletoe, that these were symbolisms or symbolic of life and vitality, vitality during the darkest, coldest time of the year, representing the hope for the return of the sun. I'm looking forward to the return of the sun also, but it's the SON, not the SUN. Then you had the wild hunt and the Yule Father. According to Norse mythology, the wild hunt was a ghostly procession led by the god Odin. There's a true god that they're celebrating and they worry about. Not the actual real god, the one true god, G-O-D, the big G, not little g, but not Odin. Even Santa Claus has been said to come from this area and time, the myth of that. There were stories told of Odin and that him and his companions were riding through the night sky, bringing blessings and challenges and gifts. Well, that's the myth influenced today is the figure of Santa Claus. So if you celebrate Santa Claus, you like mythology, you worship Odin as well. Well, that's kind of a stretch. I don't care, it's a stretch. But we have to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, enough is enough. It's enough is enough. Stop being a lukewarm Christian. Stop trying to just, this will lose me subscribers. I'm not going to be in big time. I'm not going to have 80 to 100 to 180 to 200,000 followers, most likely, because this will damage that. But I don't care. This is the truth. If you're a born-again Christian, this is the truth. Stand up. I don't want to take too much time. I'm looking at the time on the clock. I like to keep things to a half an hour. Sometimes I go over. And there's feasting and merrymaking, of course. Families were getting together and have food and drinking and stuff like that. They were gift giving and all singing hymns and singing songs. And we get some of our Catholic hymns these days. Catholic hymns. And we get the symbolism of fire, Yule celebration. It just goes on and on. Now we have the Christmas lights during the winter holidays. Because and the tradition then was many homes would have large fires burning and candles would be placed in the windows as a sign of welcoming to the return of the sun. And it was part of the honoring the gods, asking for their blessings the coming year. Now the custom evolved in the modern tradition of decorating with candles and Christmas lights. What do we put in our windows? You know those little candles that we light up and we put in the window? Where do you think those come from? Those are honoring the gods, plural. Little g. And then you got gift giving was a big part of it, like I said. And the singing of carols. They used to sing their own carols and solstice songs. And what do we do today? I mean, how much evidence do you need? How much more do you need out there? And I'll give you more as we go along. We'll even get into the next video I do. I'll talk about the evergreen trees. I don't understand why. I just don't get born-again Christians who say they're born-again Christians, professing Christians, lukewarm and going to hell. Sorry. Well, Christmas doesn't send you to hell. Well, no, Christmas by itself doesn't send you to hell, but I'll tell you right now, those who usually celebrate Christmas are committing other sins, more likely than not. Hello, how are you? I'm one of those guys back in the day. Well, if this is okay, and then that's okay, and then that's okay, and this is okay. Well, I mean, it's not a big deal. Well, now you're just being legalistic, and now see, all this starts to happen. And you start inching away from the truth. The next thing you know, you're lost. You go off the path that you were supposed to be on, nice and clear. And then, well, that might be quicker. Let's go this side. Oh, and you're lost in the woods. Then you're freezing overnight, and people have to find you. A search and rescue squad has to be sent out. I actually had to be part of that with my brother one time. It's another story, but a father and his daughter went off the path, got lost in the woods, and anyway. But they were safe and they survived, so that was the best part. But will you survive? Will you get back on the path? Will somebody find you? Will somebody find you? Are you going to throw yourself so far away nobody can find you that you won't listen? All right. Well, I don't want to get too much further here. It's a half an hour in. I appreciate your time. I really do. Um, I just implore you to realize, as a Christian, a born again Christian, what you are celebrating. It's not the birth of Christ. It is not the birth, and it's not the waiting for the only begotten Son. We're celebrating the birth of the only begotten Son. We're celebrating the rebirth of a pagan son. S-U-N. All right, thank you for your time with that. So God bless and have a beautiful evening. Good night.